All right, welcome back, everybody, and welcome to Kitchen Table Talk, a Break the Stigma Inc. podcast, where real, unfiltered conversations about first responder mental health and wellness happen. I'm Michael Long, firefighter, paramedic, and founder of Break the Stigma Inc. This show is a place for all of us as firefighters, EMTs, police officers, dispatchers, and other medical professionals to pull up a chair, share stories, and talk about the parts of the job most people don't see. Here, we're going to laugh, we'll reflect, we'll learn, and we'll remind each other that it's okay to not be okay, because mental health is just as vital as physical health, and together we can break the stigma. So grab yourself a cup, take a seat, and join us at the table for this episode of Kitchen Table Talk. And as always, we would like to bring back our wonderful co-host, Nick Robben.
Michael, how are you? Good to see you, buddy. This is an
Good to see
exciting
you.
one. I love when we have guests so we can dive into somebody else's brain for the afternoon.
Yes, definitely. So, as Robin said, on this episode, we did bring in a guest, and we would like to introduce Teena Silkwood. She is a former EMT police officer, current RN, worked in the hospital base, also works in a ketamine clinic, which is going to be a big part of our topic, I believe, today, which I would imagine we could dive real deep into that. But instead of me butchering Tina's introduction like I did on our last guest, I am going to let Tina take it from here.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you guys. I'm super passionate about um, mental health and first responders, first line workers, and just kind of like you guys breaking the stigma because, as we all know, the old days of us hiding mental health problems, it's over in our professions. We're seeing more and more people coming out and saying, hey, these are the problems that I have. Let's find a solution to this. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
No, we're definitely happy to have you, and we'd love, like Robin said, we'd love to have that other perspective, those other thoughts. And everyone's brain's a little different, and people are getting used to me and Robin's brain, even though we're not even used to it yet. Um, but it's neat to see these different ideas and these different mentalities, and obviously the stigma behind first responder mental health, and especially when we start looking at treatments for first responder mental health. It's kind of one of those things that the run-of-the-mill ordinary treatments aren't always our best options, but sometimes they are. And then you get, like you said, the stigma on just coming forward with having an issue, then deciding what kind of treatment you want to do and telling people what kind of treatments you do. I mean, myself, I think I've gone through every ringer of treatment available. And then post Maryland, when I went to my inpatient facility, I became a guinea pig for a lot more because I was just really interested. And one of them was the ketamine. But you'd be surprised when you tell people, like, hey, I'm going to do ketamine, the kind of reaction you get from people that have no idea what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
as we all know, in the EMS and fire and police world and everywhere else, ketamine is becoming kind of a overly used street drug on top of it. So it's getting that rap like it does with opiates and anything else. So
So it is. It's like, it's a party drug. Ravers used to use it. I guess I was never a raver. I'm a little old for that, but uh, street drugs. And then as far as EMS people are concerned, like, oh, well, yeah, when a person is out there and they're schizophrenic and they're naked running through the street, that's when we give ketamine. That's what we give ketamine for. We're given 200 IM to just settle a patient down. So, and then me having originally come from the ER too as a nurse, we were given it for conscious sedations. So when I applied at this IV clinic and she was like, well, our main focus is the ketamine therapy. I was like, what are we doing with ketamine? Not in a hospital. Because I'm like, we need all life-saving things in case anything happens. But ketamine it's becoming a lot more well known. When I first started in 2018, people were like, "You do what again?" So there's so much research out there now, and so many even companies like Johnson and Johnson, they own Spravato, so they do the nasal S-ketamine. So it's becoming a little more. It's FDA approved, so it's only FDA approved in the nasal spray right now, but it's just getting out there and more well known for people to be like, oh, okay, well, maybe that is an alternative to the typical SSRIs you might see from your traditional treatments. And I'm not saying SSRIs don't work. They do work for some people, but with treatment resistant depression, anxiety, PTSD, and we're seeing so much more of that. And we're seeing that these medications aren't always doing the trick. Or when they do work, hey, we have to compound. Well, it's not working anymore. Well, let's add this one. well, now those two aren't working, so let's add this one. And sometimes people are on upwards of 10 medications just for mood stabilizers. And it's just getting to a point that you add something and something else happens, so you have to take another medication. So we're getting a lot of polypharmacy from people. Um, and ketamine isn't necessarily going to get you off of any mental health medications, but you could lower your dose. You could lower the amount of medication you're taking on a daily basis. So we're seeing a lot of that, and we see a lot of really good results. A lot of the studies are showing that ketamine is more effective, sometimes almost 30% more effective than typical SSRI treatments.
Yeah,
And
I think a lot of times when we get pretty far down our own mental health pathways, we're looking for a fix, and uh, taking a pill every day sometimes doesn't feel like the fix, and sometimes they don't, quite frankly, make you feel like yourself. And there's a lot of avoidance with pills. So I really like to see this as, another avenue for people struggling with mental health, as something they can go. They receive this treatment. I believe it's a couple hours, isn't it? That you just kind of sit
yeah, yep.
and let it do its thing, and hopefully it kind of rewires some of those pathways we develop. It's not something that we've talked about in the first couple episodes, but Mike and I are both huge proponents of reading the book, The Body Keeps a Score,
Yeah.
and really understanding the pathways we develop as first responders and how trauma affects our brain. And it's kind of like when you're going to buy a new car, and you say you settle on a Chevy Silverado or whatever, and then all of a sudden you start seeing them all over the place. What's happening there is you're developing a brain pathway, and you're telling your brain, hey, this thing's important to me, and so it starts to look for it. Now, if you scroll that back to how we deal with our mental health, when we start dealing with trauma and negative emotions, the more we pay attention to those things, the negatives in our life, the more pathways open up to our brain, like, hey, this is important. This is what we should be paying attention to. And it kind of creeps into our everyday life, whether it's negativity on social media, which we talked about in episode 3, and what we're consuming, or whether it's complaints around whether it's the firehouse or the nurse's station, as you know. All those places are kind of hubs for complaints, and we continue to just foster stronger and stronger negative pathways within our brain. So it's really interesting to see maybe how ketamine treatment can rewire those pathways and break some of those bonds within our own brain.
I'm glad you said that about the neural pathways. And in our line of work, in first responders, nurses, doctors, everybody, you are compartmentalizing. And I know you guys talked about that on your first episode. And that's just what we do. That's what we're trained to do. It's probably some kind of trauma response that all of us have had traumas somewhere in our life. And then as we go into these jobs, we just have learned to compartmentalize. And, when I go to work, I don't think about my problems at home. I don't think about how stressful my kids make me, or, financial problems or problems with my ex-husband. I don't think about that stuff while I'm at work, because I'm focused on work, and that is the task at hand. And that it's good and bad that we can compartmentalize, but at the same time, what's it doing to our brains, and with SSRIs, you're getting that uptake in serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine. But if it doesn't have anywhere to go, because the pathways are not even communicating anymore, the neurotransmitters are broken, then taking the medication isn't going to help you as much as you thought. So sometimes someone will get on an SSRI, and they do take 2 to 6 weeks to really feel the full effects of. And they do feel good for a little while, but then they're like, well, I felt good when I first started, but now I don't feel any different. I'm depressed again. I'm having suicidal ideations. Well, the alternative with ketamine therapy is that, you have all these neurons that don't touch each other, they don't communicate. But the neurotransmitters are what's transmitting your dopamine, your serotonin to each neuron. So if you keep adding SSRIs, you keep getting more of those hormones, but they don't have anywhere to go. So they're not communicating. I don't want to say what's the point, but you're always going to be stuck in that mental health crisis, or where you're always feeling like nothing's working. So with ketamine, you are rewiring those neurotransmitters. And that's why I always say it builds on each treatment. So one treatment is not going to fix you. I always say if one treatment fixed everyone, we would charge $1 million for it. Trust me. Um, the doctor would not allow me to charge what we do. So we do, multiple studies, and studies have shown, even through Johnson and Johnson with their Spravato study, um, it is 3 weeks, and you do 6 treatments in those 3 weeks, and that has shown to have the most efficacy with the ketamine treatments, whether you're getting IV, IM, or the nasal spray. And after that, you kind of do maintenance. So we've made the neurotransmitters start communicating again, but they're not necessarily going to stay that way because you're going to go back to work and you're going to have stress at home. So you're going to try to fall right back into that. And so maintenance is important with ketamine therapy, but also therapy. Therapy. I am not your therapist. I'm a nurse. And I don't mind listening to people's problems. I'll do it all day long. But if people aren't doing talk therapy, they're doing themselves a disservice. Whether you have mental health issues or not, I think everybody, I don't want to hear about everybody's problems all the time, and they don't want to hear about mine. Pay a professional,
Yeah,
I think you nailed it there. I think I've said that in every episode so far about going to see a therapist, and whether you need one or not. I think just even once a year, I challenge people, go once a year to get that third party, unbiased,
yes,
for lack of better terms, bitch fest out of the way, and let them tell you. And I think me and Robin had this conversation on one. I don't remember if it was the first or the third, where it was like, you can go in there. It might have been on with Lindsay and Dina, but you can go in there and be like, "Oh, here's all my problems. Here's why it's bad. Here's what's happening." And that therapist might look at you and say, "You're the problem. Quit blaming other people."
hear that.
Yeah. But it's funny because in my case, like I've had challenges obviously over the last few years going through even post-crisis and pre-crisis, but even pre-crisis, once I started getting the appropriate therapies when I was out in Maryland and getting, the appropriate talk therapies and the group sessions and things like that, the amount of clinicians that told me you are the problem in your own problems. And I really started to reevaluate. I was like, oh my God, like I do this, which causes this, which then causes this reaction. And then all of a sudden it's a spiral effect. And all of that can be solved so simply by having, and we know it, but we won't admit it, but having that person we're paying as a professional to tell us all the things we already know. It's amazing how much it can get through to somebody.
Yeah, you got to pay someone to not tell you what you want to hear, but actually just tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I think we saw
absolutely.
this. I think we saw this when we were kids and we never realized it. But you remember playing like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat? After you leveled up to a certain level, you actually ended up having to fight yourself in the later levels. So I always think that's funny now when I think about mental health is you can achieve all you can achieve right up until you have to, face yourself and face your own what you have going on. And I think that is probably when we talk about breaking the stigma, not just talking about our problems, but breaking through to ourselves and figuring out, okay, what do I need to do to improve my situation? And I think
Yeah,
that's the hardest part for most people because it's way outside your comfort zone. And making those changes and learning discipline is probably the most uncomfortable you can be. So what I like about, the things we talk about on this podcast is how can we help you face yourself? We could put you in a recliner in a K-hole and see if you can do battle there. Or, you take yourself for a walk, just like when we have a bad dog around the house that's chewing on everything and they're getting into stuff they shouldn't. What do we usually do to fix that? We take them for a walk. So really, we're helping to build just some different outlets for taking on and doing battle with ourselves.
now, Mike, tell me about when you would do group as someone with ADHD. How was that for you? Did you find that pretty effective? Or were you always listening to someone? Because this is my problem. I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm engaged. I got it. But also, there's a part of me that's planning what am I going to say next? And that's the narcissist in a lot of us. I don't want to hear what's wrong with me. And I need to stop and really focus and listen to what people are saying. And there's a lot of people that cannot do that. And you notice the ADHD people will interrupt people while they're talking. They're not doing it to be rude. They're doing it because they cannot hold it in.
Oh, I've been
You,
like grabbing my chair over here because you guys have made so many points I want to jump in on, but you guys are doing so great together. So I'm like, I'm just gonna keep quiet. I'm sweating because I want to say things.
Self-control, buddy.
Yeah, but no, groups in Maryland were quite interesting, and I think from the ADHD perspective, what made it easier was that Maryland is just for firefighters and EMS. So I would say 80% of us in the group therapies were struggling with the same ADHD problems, and the clinicians would just shut us all down because if they let one of us go on like a rant, then it would turn into another rant, then it turned into another rant, and then all of a sudden there'd be 20 of us arguing with each other in the room, all about the same point, and we would probably all be on this arguing the same point on top of it. But no, I think it was for me when I was there. It was a unique experience, different than if I were to do something like similar nowadays. When I got there, and Robin can attest to this, I was pretty much the living dead. I looked it, I felt it, and I believed it.
I think your lab values back that up too.
Yeah, no, yeah, my lab values, they were pretty much the doctor asked me at one point how I even functioned because of all of the substances in my system. And that wasn't just substances that weren't supposed to be in my system. That was the amount of medications I was on also when I got there, which was why I really wanted to jump in on the polypharmacy conversation, but we'll get into that later.
You're like, I'm taking notes over here.
But no, it was when I got there, it was for me, I was told about 2 days in. It took me about 2 days to actually like comprehend what was going on. And I had an individual that had been there for a few weeks already, and we were chit-chatting, and he basically said, man, just dive into the process and do the work. And from that point on, whether it was in groups or individuals, or even at the lunch table when we were all chit-chatting at lunch, I spent more time focusing on what I needed to learn and what I needed to hear versus what I needed to say. Obviously I can talk with the best of them and I can go on and on for hours. I mean, I do public speaking for a reason, but it's in that point in my life, I knew that me speaking wasn't going to solve my problems because I did a lot of speaking beforehand. I yelled at a lot of people leading up to going to Maryland, and it solved nothing. So I think that was immensely for me. I was able to kind of shut some of that down, knowing that, okay, I can't do this on my own. So now I'm going to let somebody else teach me.
Yeah.
What's kind of funny about Mike talking about how much he talked and how he was acting, and to put it in a frame of reference, Mike yelled at maybe one of the scariest men on the planet that works with us. He's a boxer, MMA background.
Gold glove boxer.
Yeah, MMA background, several wins at Guns and Hoses, and Mike was so out of his mind at the time that he felt it was appropriate to yell at this man. And to think that he didn't put him in the hospital that night with a new form of brain injury is pretty incredible. It speaks a lot to that person's patience and their understanding of what Mike was going through. But yeah, when we talk about everything that was going on with Mike and how really just out of control he was, he had everybody in his corner pulling for him even when he was at his worst. And that speaks a lot to where Mike is at now and how much he learned from that, whether it's out of motivation or guilt or being motivated by guilt, we're not sure. But, going back to talking about like group therapy, a lot of people would assume like, oh, I'm sure he's taking the peer support classes and he goes to like the peer group to help. Mike will be the first to tell you that I don't. So that's one of my boundaries is if I go to group and I listen to everyone's problems, I will leave there with, and Mike knows I'm a note taker. I will leave there with a large legal pad full of notes and everyone's problems and try and fix all those things. And I'll put so much of my own stuff on the back burner. So that's something that I learned, that for my mental health, it is not good for me to take on everybody else's struggles. I'm fine one-on-one, but yeah, when you talk about group therapy and even these podcasts, when we get going, it's so hard to hold back because there's so many good ideas that jump in there.
Yeah, I think if we could find a way to edit where we all could just talk constantly and just my producer could just split it all apart, we would fill 4 hours of information in 45 minutes.
Absolutely.
But I think, Robin, you made a really good point with groups, and circling back to like groups in Maryland. I think group therapy, I actually really enjoyed my group therapy. For me, it was a unique experience. because pre Maryland, I felt no one understood what I was going through. No one knew the depression, no one knew the anxiety, no one knew the substance abuse, no one understood the pain. And then the biggest one was no one understood why I tried to take my own life. But sitting in a group of 20 other individuals that had gone down that same road and being in a group, having that conversation, I was like, it was the first time in my entire crisis and probably my entire life leading up to that I didn't feel alone in my own brain. It was like, oh my God, there's 20 other people here that understand everything I'm going through. We might have got here in different ways, but the way we're combating it now and the way we got here are all very similar. I think that's the positive effect groups can have. But I can know now, like I know now, like when we do peer groups and things, I don't have, well, don't let me don't, I'm going to rephrase. I was going to say I don't have as many problems, but that's not true. I have new problems and I have my own methods of dealing with my problems that are very beneficial. But I kind of do what Robin does. I am much like when my phone rings or I'm in a peer group or the charity phone rings, like I'm already invested 100% helping. Like I want to help. I want to fix the problem. I want to do everything I can to do it. If I sat down in a group of people I didn't know of 30 and they gave me 30 different problems, I would forget about mine and I'd be trying to solve those other 30 problems. That's where we have to find that transition to the mentality of groups, and how important group therapy can be versus finding the benefit in it and also knowing when, hey, you're there for yourself, not for everyone else.
And that I think goes to our careers. It is we're helping people all the time, all the time. We're helping people, and it helps us forget about our own selves. So I think sometimes with like Nick and groups, it's easier for me to try to fix your problems than it is to self-reflect. And it is. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to sit down and say, hey, I gotta fix this. I gotta fix that. It does. It takes work getting sober. It takes work getting out of some of these bad habits that we create. And me, I'm a chronic worker because it's like idle hands. I keep myself out of trouble by working 60 hours a week. And it's not an answer, but it's just the way I cope right now, and it needs some work, but
Well, it's
yeah.
funny you said that because I just went to therapy a couple days ago, and my therapist made a very good observation that I was already aware of. Most of my therapy sessions go with, because just so people are aware, like I'm going for my master's in psychology, like this is my passion outside of
Mhm.
fire service. So she hates when I come in and I'm the therapist and I'm already fixing my own problems, but I need her to tell me the same thing. But we were talking about, she always drills me about the ways I daily take care of myself, and ice baths always one that she knows when I stop doing my ice baths, then I'm starting to neglect myself. And she asked me about the ice baths, and I told her, I said, "Oh yeah, I got this new setup the other day. It's a filter; it circulates the water, so it's even colder." And she's like, "That sounds great. I would never do it." And I made the comment. I said, "I am the most relaxed in stress. Put me in a stressful environment like a bucket full of ice, and I can relax." And she goes, "That is the most alpha personality comment I've ever made." But circle around any fire station, EMS house, nurses station, police station, whatever it is, and you are going to find 99% alpha personalities.
Yeah.
And that is the difficult part with addressing mental health, is that we're all really good at being alpha and fixing everything and doing everything, but tell one of us to internally look at ourselves and we're going to shut that shit down as fast as possible.
No thanks. No thanks.
I think
Well,
I think
go
another
ahead.
cool part about our career, and this is an interesting part of the podcast, I have worked on an ambulance and fire truck, obviously with Mike, but I have also worked on an ambulance with Teena back in the early 2000s. We did some 12-hour city shifts together. I was a brand new medic at the time, and we had like a float position, and I would get floated to her ambulance, and it what my point here is having a good partner, because as a new paramedic in a strange place, in a very busy place where a lot of pressure was on you, I had a good partner in Teena. She was always calm, and she had a lot of experience, before I got there. And do this, don't do that, definitely don't do that. Write this down. And that was huge for me as a new medic. And then, Mike comes into my life, and this was pre-crisis, and he's a good dude, solid guy around the firehouse. Had some underlying anger, but we like to work out together. We worked together, and we had some tough calls together. And Mike again was another just kind of voice of calm, and he was a doer. And the point is about our careers is take what you know about a good partner on your truck, or who you work with, another nurse, somebody you can learn from. Bring that over to your mental health side and find a good partner that you can bounce stuff off of, your ideas, or somebody who really checks you from time to time, like, was that a good idea? Should you do that? Maybe write this down, maybe write that book. But that's the thing we can learn, especially from the fire side. And as far as the police side goes, I hate to see one-man cars. And I know that police officers across the nation are spread thin, but I think there's so much more value in holding each other accountable as police officers, and just really having somebody to talk to in that car and somebody to back you up instead of calling for backup that's 5 minutes away in a good case. And the further out you get the sheriff's deputies way out in the county, you're talking 20, 30 minutes to get another person there. So, that's something that we can learn from within our own career, and our mental health is good, solid partners that we can count on and people that we can trust. And, for you police chiefs out there, figure out how to get more two-man cars on the road. I think you'll
Mm.
see a huge change in American policing if you put more two-person cars out there.
Oh, absolutely. I was like, oh, when I was on the fireside and I was like, I'd become a police officer if I could ride with somebody because I'm all 5 foot nothing. At the time, I was 125 pounds, and I'm yelling at people like this. So when I got a partner, it was some of the best days that I had at the police department. You had fun with your partner. You see them more than you see your spouse. You're with them 40, 50 hours a week. So it's having a good partner, someone you can trust, someone you can rely on, and someone that you can vent to, right? You know, most
But
importantly.
I think that partner, whether it be police, EMS, fire, whatever it is, Nick kind of nailed the conversation there of having that someone to hold you accountable. And I'm just thinking in my head of like all of the times I've been on like an EMS call, and the frustration of the call or whatever is happening, and I'm teching, and I'm the lead, and I'm talking, and I'm doing all the things. And you've got one, or well, in our case, you've got one behind you, or you have four behind you, but you have other people there, and they start seeing your behavior change, or your tone
Mhm.
change, or something going off the rails a little bit. And you have that individual behind you saying, okay, this isn't going well. Hey, Mike, let me go grab this. I'll finish up this conversation, or I'll do this next. You have that ability, and I can see on the police side of it too. And I don't have any experience in it, but I would imagine to be the same. Whereas, especially in those situations, which I know you guys deal with it more than the EMS side would, is being in those conflict situations where maybe emotions and adrenaline are taking over of the lead person, and that second person's just sitting back watching, and they're like, hey, okay, let me jump in, and you just go take some deep breaths. I can see the benefit in that, outside of, like you said, having that individual with you, to where
Yeah.
you have someone to talk to, because that's actually something. So I do a lot of conferences throughout the year. And one of the ones we're doing in March, I sit on the panel to try and plan it and get the right speakers and everything like that. And we've been trying to find a very good police person that can talk about the struggles of the police side. And one of the things we always talk about is, like, if EMS or fire runs a bad call, we get to go back to the station, or we get to go back to the truck, and we get to BS with the people we're with, and we get to hash out everything that happened. A police
Yeah.
officer goes to get back in their car, and they're on their own for
Yeah.
another, could be 11, 10, 9 out, whatever it is. And they have no one that they can just sit in their car and BS with
Yeah.
and figure out, hey, what went wrong? What went right? Why did I do
I've
this?
gotten back in my car and been covered in blood, and it's just like, all right, on to the next call. It's not like we carry extra uniforms with us. It was like, okay, well, next. So it's And I think important as well, and kind of going back to your situation too, and what Nick said, having that partner, but having them recognize that something's not right. So you, I feel like, as far as what you guys have said, had some obvious signs. Hey, we know something's going on with him. But what about those people that have the mental health issues that aren't showing signs? And I would say of the last two policemen in St. Louis City that have passed away that I knew, one, obvious signs. He was doing EAP. He was, they pulled him off the street. The one before that, that unfortunately ended his own life. No signs. No, everybody says this is absolutely out of nowhere. No one saw signs. So, there are two sides. So it's having that partner that's maybe knows that sees even just subtle changes and recognizing those changes in someone that you work with every day and saying, hey, maybe you should talk to somebody.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. And Nick's a big proponent where we're at is that camaraderie and building that family atmosphere. And I jump on that too, trying to get everybody involved in not just things at work, but outside of work. So that way we can learn each other. We can learn each other. We can learn each other's personalities. We can learn how we react. And you can see those subtle changes if something's going on. Because I think you're 100% right. There's, especially in the world of men, we feel that it's a sign of weakness to admit that something's wrong with us. And in my case, I mean, as Robben seen in the beginning of Crisis, it was more than obvious that something was wrong with me. I was no longer trying to hide it. I was no longer trying to mask any of the outlying emotions, mainly anger and rage. But after Maryland and we addressed all of that and kind of got myself in the right frame of mind, I looked back at probably the last 20 years of my life and I was like, oh my God, there was warning signs for the last 20 years. There has been things throughout my entire life that if I would have known what I know now, I could have probably addressed this 10, 15 years ago and never had that situation even happen to get to where I'm at now. And I like to think, and I hate when I hear that people, they lost their life and people are like, oh, it's such a surprise. We never seen it coming. And I don't disagree that there's probably situations like that. But I would like to believe that there was something somewhere that someone noticed that was just one of those things that were like, he's just having an off day, or he's just, that's just, oh, he's tired, or this is going on, or this is going on. And we start to make excuses to ourselves not to ask that individual, hey man, what's going on? You all right? Tell me about it. Open the
Because we don't want to
conversation.
talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I do my presentations. I always tell people it's not about asking somebody if they're all right. It's what are you going to do next? Because how many of us walk down the hallway and say, hey, how's it going? And you're like, oh, good, great. And then you just pass by. Now, what happens when you walk down the hallway and I look at Robben and I say, hey, how's it going? And he goes, oh man, it's not good. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to say, look, all right, well, yeah, no, that's not the answer I was looking for. So I'm going to keep going this way. I think so-and-so is over there. Go talk to them. Like it's not only the approach to opening the conversation, but also knowing what to do with it when somebody, because I think that's the biggest fear, or a fear I had, and I'm sure a fear a lot of people has, is if somebody goes, hey, how's it going? And I tell them, oh, it's not good. Yeah. What's going to be the follow-up? Then the fear starts to take over, of the fear of, okay, now people are going to judge me. Now people are going to, they're going to assume I'm crazy, or am I going to lose my job, or am I going to go back into a straitjacket? Am I going to get handcuffed again? You start going down this rabbit hole of fear, and there's again that vulnerability and breaking that stigma around just having a conversation. I actually just had a conversation this morning in a meeting I had, that somebody asked, they're trying to establish a peer team, and I guess lawyers got involved, and so be it. Lawyers they do what they're supposed to do, but I can argue with a lawyer all day long about what if questions, because that seems to be a thing. And it circles back to a conversation I had a long time ago about what if questions. And I was asked in a peer meeting, what if someone has a crisis during a peer meeting? That's terrible. And I said, no, that's great. I said, if they're in a peer meeting, they're in for the word I hate, a safe place, but they're in a place where that conversation is open, and we broke that shell, and we gave them the ability to be vulnerable and comfortable. And they had this conversation, and they realized things are a lot worse than I thought, and I can't do it anymore. Well, guess what? Now you're in a room with a bunch of individuals that care, or one individual that cares, or, a handful, and they're going to do everything in their power. I can guarantee it. And I always say anything peer related. If I'm in a peer group and somebody says something that I think is detrimental to their own life or someone else's, at no point in time can I think of anyone that's going to be like, you know what? All right, you can go now. Like, we'll see you later. Like, no, everyone's going to do everything in their power to fix the problem, because that's what we do, is fix problems. But letting someone be vulnerable and then taking that fear away. And we're really good at going back to these what if, what if, what if.
Mhm.
And I hate that, because I can turn it around and say, well, what if that person doesn't come to my peer support group because they don't feel comfortable or they fear the consequence? And then we find them in their bunk room 2 hours later, or they go home and decide they can't do it anymore, or they just go out to the parking lot and that's the end of what they want to do. Well, guess what? They could have potentially not gone down that road by being involved in a vulnerable situation, or letting themselves be vulnerable, letting themselves be comfortable, letting themselves be confident that, hey, I can talk. And I think that's the hard part with it all. And that's where that partnership and the camaraderie and knowing each other's
Mhm.
personalities is allowing yourself to be vulnerable and be the ability to have that conversation without fear of repercussion. There's going to be, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've said many of things during crisis that got me locked up in a hospital, but by all means, I hated it, but it also saved my life, because I had, in all, in 4 months, I had 3 suicide attempts. So obviously I was avidly trying. How many times is me saying something to the right person that made that phone call that saved my life by them causing that consequence of me going to the hospital, and then eventually leading to an inpatient facility.
I think it's important to ask too when somebody, and I jokingly say it to Mike all the time, hey, how's it going? Not good. Um, is kind of my joke. But when we're met with that, and if you're somebody who's capable of handling what happens next, I would bring up two questions. One, you want to talk about it? Two, you want to do something about it. So if they just want to talk about it, just open that to let them know that you're willing to talk about it. And if they don't want to talk about it, okay, do you want to do something about it? Do something about it, meaning getting some type of treatment, starting therapy, or something a little more concrete than just talking about it. And I think that's what helps open that conversation for that person. And obviously their answer initially is going to be, I was just kidding. And then you got to hit them with the no, you weren't.
You're like, oh wait, you want me to do something?
No,
Yeah.
no, no.
And no, I think that's too where I would like more departments to step in. And I have met with higher ups at the St. Louis Police Department. I mean, I don't know if they want me to say that, but and there is still that, hey, I've made it all the way here. I've got this one last person. I'm not going to say who he is. And they're like, you know what? He's old school, so he doesn't want to get into that. Okay, because I'm like, hey, we've got ketamine treatment for these people. The foundation, I've talked to them. They said they will use their mental health money, donate it, and because it's expensive to do ketamine treatment. Uh, And we're not the highest paid people out here, right? We're out here saving lives for pennies. And so I'm like, what if they would do it if they could afford it, right? You're thinking, well, if your excuse is always, well, I'm not going to get the help because it's too much. Well, then I'm going to take that factor completely out of it. And then the department was like, yeah, we're not into it. Like, all right, it was lots of meetings later, and you break through a bunch of people, yeah, super support it, and then it's like you get to the top, and it's like, hey, we're not there yet, and it's disheartening because they really are like they throw EAP. We offer EAP. Well, let me tell you that people that work for your department, you don't always think they have your best interest at heart, right? If these therapists are working for your same department, you're always afraid that they report back to your superiors or other people that you're working with. So people still shy away from even free AAP, and I don't know how to change people's minds, and I wish I did about things like this in these departments.
And you nailed two of the biggest things that break the stigma, works for. And I'll go with the culture one first. Is it's amazing. the cultural difference between generations. And I completely understand it. Tradition, culture, all of that. I'm at a weird age of where I came in with the old school guys that are retired or retiring, and that's who I was trained under. And then now I'm training this new generation that has a completely different perspective on a lot of things, but mental health especially. One of the first questions I ask in all of my presentations is I make the entire audience, as long as it's not too big, tell me how long they've been doing what they do. Have you been doing it for 6 months or have you been doing it for 30 years? Because I guarantee this conversation is going to go completely different from the guy with 6 months on and the guy with 30 years on. And the problem is, and what I explain to people is, I have to get all of you on the same page, because just like anything else in the fire service, and I think we were just talking about this before we started recording, was, oh, that's how we've always done it. We get stuck in that mentality of old school tradition, old school culture. It's how we've always done it. It's worked this far. Why not? Well, guess what? Some of these things aren't working. Yes, they get us by, but it's not working. So cultural change is a huge part of what we push in our education, is like, hey, I understand why you believe the way you do when it comes to mental health. It has been the way things have been for countless years. But guess what? How many lives have you lost because of that mentality? So why not try and give some new thought into how to approach the situation? And it's pretty neat when I have these conversations, because then I start getting into my story and things and other people and the way we've handled some things and these new age treatments and things like that and how beneficial they are. And most of them have no idea any of this is out there because they want no part of this conversation. But then when you explain it to them and really break it down, you start seeing minds change. And it's just getting into the room with the right people that make those decisions to have them understand the consequences of not changing, or the consequences of letting a little bit of change happen. And it's one of those things. I've had people that are retired or going to retire that I've had these conferences with, and they come up and they say, oh my God, this is awesome. I wish we had stuff like this when I was younger. I would be in such better shape now. I'm not going to do anything for myself now because I'm just a lost cause. And it's, I'm just still going to stay in that old school mentality, but I'm glad you're doing it for the new people. Why? Change your mentality. I mean, I get it's
Yeah.
hard, but like, I just gave you all the information you needed and all the reasons to start addressing the culture and traditions. I mean, essentially, if we were to stay in that same cultural mindset of like, let's just ignore it. And I've had this statement made on multiple occasions where I say it to people is, it's like the elephant in the room and nobody wants to address it until it's standing on your fucking chest.
Oh,
And then everybody wants to get rid of the elephant. Why don't we just put the elephant in the other room? Why do we keep just ignoring it? Well, let's just stop ignoring it, because if we stay in this culture, guess what? The new generation coming in is going to be just as messed up as we are. And how many lives are we going to take by not helping them?
it's that
You know,
reactive mentality.
Reactive versus proactive.
one thing I would like to see change in, from in working with administrations, and if you want to see cultures change within your own, your department or your hospital or wherever it is treating mental injuries like physical injuries. And I think there really should be a place within, as time allows, but for almost a mental health light duty. So we're going to take you off the track. We're going to cut down on your call volume for a little while. And it's a set time, it's a couple weeks. And we're going to look at like, hey, just come in here, do some stuff for the department. There's plenty of extra projects, paperwork, other chiefs need help. Maybe learn a new role in the department and just come do a little 9 to 5. So what we're doing is we're taking them off the track. They're gonna get some sleep in their bed. We let people leave for physical therapy when they're injured. We need to let them leave for their regular therapy so that, we can kind of take 4 to 6 weeks, maybe as short as 2, and just let them kind of decompress. And the way that, I would bring this to is that would be a good time to build that ketamine treatment in. So you have these weeks off. And what'd you say? You said one is a 3 week program?
Yeah, 6 treatments in 3 weeks, so you're going twice a week.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do that with physical therapy. So here's an opportunity for somebody who's maybe they're getting by, maybe they're still getting the job done, but we give them these 3 weeks to try and get like a soft reset to make sure that we're not going into crisis and we're not making things worse. So the only caveat to that is if their stress is not the job and their stress is at home, well, leaving them at home for extended periods of time, while that could increase their stress, it may give them a chance to kind of sort out, some of those things that are going on. So I like that one. The other thing I think that, from almost a nationwide level that we should look at for first responders is every 5 years of service, maybe you need a sabbatical, um, and just take some real time off. And in, any type of sabbatical, and I've typed this up, I forget where it's at the moment, but mine happened by accident. I blew my back out in 2021 and I got 6 weeks off and I was doing physical therapy, but at the same time, I wasn't going to work. I was working on myself and not just physically, but mentally as well, because I'm into exercise and that's my outlet. Well, now I can't exercise. I'm not going to work, so I lost a ton of my purpose in there. So I really was forced to focus on myself for about those 6 weeks. But I can guarantee I came out better because of that, that time frame. The only thing I wish I would have done now is one, some type of therapy within those 6 weeks. And now I found out I could have been doing ketamine treatments the whole time. I don't know if it was around in 21, but in a 30-year career, that would be 6 times in your career where you knew there was a break coming and you knew that that was your time to work on you and your time to get better. And I don't, if I was an administrator, I don't care if you go to Mexico for one of the weeks, but like, let's put some work in the other 5 and let's see you come back better. And what you would see within these departments is you would kind of have this rotating group of people that are coming back energized for the job. And they may be more resilient against complaining and negativity. And they may be that bully for positivity within your environment. And that's something that I always push is you should be a bully for positivity where you work, whether it's talking to admin about making things better, whether it's stopping the conversation at the engine house that take too long. Mike, what didn't we for a while we limited complaints to 1 cup of coffee. So
Yep.
once the complaint train got going at the kitchen table, we would fill everybody's cup and we would say, okay, everybody's cup is full. Complaints start now. We're going to get them all out when these cups of coffee are done. We're probably too caffeinated to sit still much longer, but that's it. We're ending it. We're ending it there. So we're putting a stop to it.
I
Yeah,
love it.
I still have a captain that if he sees me drinking coffee at like 12 or 1, he's like, "Is that your first cup? You shouldn't be complaining. Is that your second cup? You're
You got
done.
anything
You're
left in
done."
there?
He'll see me start getting
I love
fired up and he'll immediately take my coffee away from me.
that. I love,
But
but yeah, I think people would have, you probably have like a newfound passion for your job once you go back after you've had that little mental break. You're like, you know what, I'm ready to go in and do this, and yeah, I support that. I want that. That seems awesome.
I always joke about I'd go back to Maryland for a trip just for a reset again because it was the most at the point in time it was probably one of the worst things I've ever done just because of the situation I was in. But the way I felt when I came back with the reset I had and the reframe of mind I had, I'd do it again just because of how great I felt coming back. Like, no phone, no, just worrying about yourself and taking care of yourself for those 33 days. Like, I came back completely refreshed. I was not worried about everything I left behind because I knew the focus was on myself at that point in time.
Tina, what are some suggestions that you have for people like, okay, so now we've opened the ketamine vial. So
Hmm.
what are some timeline suggestions? Is it like you should be talk therapy and then your treatment of 3 weeks and then more talk therapy? Like who and where when do you go seek this out? Or when do you see, I guess the better question would be is when are you seeing people seeking this out? Like where did they reach in their career lives that now is the time to seek this out and pay for it as expensive as it is?
Well, the people that we mostly see they're on the edge. They're suicidal ideations. They're feel like sometimes they can't work. It's debilitating. We mostly see PTSD obviously with first responders, military, doctors, nurses. therapists. We see therapists, and it's like they take on all that stuff every day. So you're talking to people that cannot get suicidal ideations out of their head, or hey, I've tried all of this and I still can't get out of bed every day. Those are the kind of people that for 20 years I've tried this, so it is people that are literally at the end of their rope. It's not like they're like, oh, I've been depressed for a week, so I thought I'd come and do this. Obviously we need people with an official diagnosis from their doctor. They still get seen by our doctor and our nurse practitioner. Um, we encourage therapy all the time. If you're not in therapy, it's, hey, here's our resources. Please seek out a therapist while you're doing this because it's only going to help. Um, and I'll kind of go through to like what we do at the office. So when you come in, you do your consultation with a provider, see if you qualify. There's only a couple non-qualifying factors. So look, schizophrenia is like a huge one because of the hallucinogenic effects of ketamine. We don't want to exacerbate some of those problems. So
Sure.
that's one that would disqualify you automatically. But then once we get you in the room, we get you comfortable. It's not such a medical environment as it is like a spa. You have light music and a comfy couch to lay on and dim lights. We try to set the mood in there. We have positive affirmations that we like everyone to read because when you do ketamine, it is so much about your mental state. And I realized that when I was in the ER and we were doing conscious sedations, the doctors would always be like, be in your happy place, be on the beach, drinking a margarita. And then people would come out of it and be like, I specifically remember laying on a beach, and we're like, oh, it's suggestion. They get into like a dream state and it's very suggestive. Your mind just is going to absorb wherever you were at. So if you go into something like that thinking, I'm depressed, or I remember this call and it was traumatizing, I do encourage people with PTSD to say, hey, this is what I need to work through. And sometimes you do have to revisit those situations. But coming out on the other side, it is because with PTSD, you're compartmentalizing stuff. So, and we haven't addressed the situations that got us there. So sometimes with PTSD, you do need to revisit those things, but we don't want to go into any kind of treatment saying, I'm depressed, I hate my life, I want to kill myself. We want to say, today is the day that I'm going to get better. I'm taking control of my mental health. So we like people to read those positive affirmations. And then for 45 minutes, we run the IVs in, or we give the IM shots, and let the people relax, have their own experience. People laugh, people cry, people don't talk to me sometimes. I go in and peek my head in and you okay? And they're just sleeping away. So, everything's monitored. We monitor vital signs the whole time. And ketamine has a really short half-life. So once the IV is finished, people kind of start coming around a little bit, still feel a little groggy, and Mike could probably attest to that. Maybe feel a little drunk or unsteady on their feet for about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to have a ride home. But the experience in there is your own experience. The medicine's going to work the same if you have a bad dream state or a good dream. The medicine works exactly the same, but it's about your experience while you're in there.
I think I texted Mike while he was in there.
Yeah, you were texting me like videos of hamsters running through like rainbow, like light shows.
That's how much I love you, buddy. I wanted you to enjoy your time.
Yeah, it was actually, I think I got caught staring at it for a while before I turned it back off. But
people ask me all the time, are you real? Is this real? And I'm like, I assure you, I am real. And then it might have been before we were recording that you had said that maybe going in with a therapist. We always say, hey, if you want to bring your therapist along and do talk therapy while you're doing ketamine, it's highly encouraged. I don't know what that therapist is going to charge you, and that's none of my business. But we have had people with severe depression and anxiety bring their therapists in with them. So anything's encouraged.
Well, that's what I was, when we were talking about that earlier, and it was pre-recording, it was a conversation that came up with my therapist because
sorry if I'm overstepping.
No, there's no overstepping with
no, there's no there's no rules.
You weren't supposed to say that.
No, it was fine. I was actually going to bring it up, but I'm glad it came up on naturally. But it was we're doing EMDR and we're having issues kind of breaking through those mental blocks. And I got to talking about this was weirdly right before this podcast was going to happen. I got to talking about the ketamine treatments and how I experiment because I've done the ketamine, I've done the SGB shot, I've done a bunch of different things. And I was talking about ketamine. I was like, man, I asked my therapist, I said, would you be willing to do a therapy session while doing ketamine? I said, the only reason I bring it up is because I feel like when we do EMDR, I have too much control. I can still physically and mentally block you out, and I'm really good at it. I've spent my entire life blocking emotion. So, and I'm also open about my emotion, but I know when somebody's trying to pull stuff out of me, that subconscious thought is blocking it. So I was like, doing the ketamine, I know that it puts me in a state of mind. It puts me physically and mentally in a state of relaxation, in a state of openness, essentially, where I feel like if you brought some of these same conversations up, I wouldn't have quite the exasperated response when it comes to the blocking. And then on top of it, you might actually get more of an emotional response out of me because I have that ability to be more vulnerable or more open, which is hard to believe that I could be less vulnerable or less open about everything I go through. But it was in my mind, I was like, this could be perfect. This could be the way to combat something like a block during EMDR. And she even mentioned, my therapist was like, EMDR is not the one all fit all there. And like we talked about at the beginning, there is no treatment that's the perfect treatment. She goes, it's always about trying new things and finding what does work for you. And it's like, well, what if we did, and this is just my brain because I love trying new things, is what if we did EMDR while on ketamine? What kind of reaction would we get? And
I said, as long as you film it, I'm into anything, right?
Yeah, but it would be neat because essentially, like looking back at the PTSD, because there's a few specific moments in what we're working on with my EMDR that I have a really hard time going back to. Not that I don't want to, well, I probably don't subconsciously, but in a state of mind, knowing what I was like when I was doing my ketamine treatments, if they tried to push me there, would I be more apt to subconsciously let myself go back there? And because even in ketamine or on your own, if you're trying to go back to a very traumatizing moment, your brain's going to subconsciously block you from doing it. There's a reason that it blocked you from the beginning. It's not going to let you just go to it now because you've accepted you want to. So that would give you the pathway to almost bypass those mental blocks. So I'd be super curious how it would go. I do plan on doing it. I've already got my therapist on board. We just have to kind of figure out all the logistics of it.
Yeah, you definitely let your guard down more so in while you're in ketamine therapy. Countless times people tell me how much they love me, and I was like, I don't believe you. I don't think this is true. You love everybody when you're on ketamine.
Yeah. I will say from experience, I would highly suggest people, if they're doing it, don't bring anything that can cause triggers. Because I've made the mistake because you don't have, and that's the other thing about ketamine that was kind of neat, is when you start to go back to some of these places, you don't have quite the emotional response that you would if you were said sober, not on ketamine. But I learned the hard way in my second treatment. I had my phone with me, and I'll be honest about this one because I'm sure most people know the story. I was arrested at one point during crisis. Super a traumatizing moment for me that I can't remember. But I was laying there doing the ketamine treatment, and my phone rang because I had it sitting next to me. I was listening to music, and I didn't answer it, but it was an unknown number. And this was post Maryland, post recovery. I was already started the charity. I was running the charity. Well, we were getting ready to start our 5K. And I was working with the county PD to set up roadblocks. Well, when I didn't answer it, he left me a voicemail, and my phone reads or texts out what the lines are. And the first one said, "This is Sergeant so-and-so." And I immediately went back to getting arrested, and I went into a full-fledged panic. I couldn't get up and run physically because I wasn't able to, thank God, because I probably would have ran out of the building. But it immediately triggered me back into like this very anxious state. But even on that note, going to a place like that, if I had a therapist sitting there with me, they could then guide through why did I have a response like that to something that is so benign.
Right. Yeah. Oh, exactly. And I encourage everyone to put their phone on do not disturb. If you're listening to your music, that's fine. Do not disturb, because people do. It has happened multiple. I'll walk in and people are on FaceTime with me. I'm like, what are you doing? No. put it away, put it away. And they're like, oh, someone called. And I'm like, let's not have any interruptions. This is 45 minutes for you,
Yeah.
and it's hard to shut it off for a lot of us. And hey, we're busy people. We need to answer the phone and need to look at those voicemails and text messages. And I'm like, yeah, it can be triggering for a lot of people. And I've had people that have had bad experiences. And I was like, well, it's not the medicine. People, and as you can probably say too. So I, I've never done it, but not to say that I wouldn't try it. I haven't come to that point in my life, but I love talking about it and I am knowledgeable about it. But your first treatment is different from your second treatment, is different from your third and your fourth. And that goes back to what I said about where you are mentally. Something might have happened one day and you're upset. So that's going to change your whole treatment. And you can't expect what you saw and heard and felt in your first treatment in any of the subsequent treatments. Nothing's going to ever be the same. And how did you feel from your first to like your second, minus the phone call?
No, my first one was, they both were great. I enjoyed both of them. I think it was a lot of benefit while being in there. I was able, honestly, a lot of what I look back on as like the biggest thing was I was able to take that 45 minutes and just relax, which I don't know
Yeah,
how to do. But being able to relax, I also was able, I mean, when you're in a room, kind of like what Robin talks about, going for your walk, getting your blood flowing, and then you just, no music,
yeah,
no nothing, you just think. It's the same thing with that. You have 45 minutes to be selfish and take care of yourself. So while you're sitting there relaxing, I started cycling through some of those issues and some of those posts or the past things. And I was able to just kind of sit and think about it without a massive emotional response to it, or that
yeah.
subconscious, like blocking it out. First one was great. Second one was great. Outside of the little trigger towards the end. Luckily, that was like right at the end, so it was only, I'd only had to struggle for like 5 minutes, but it was a very neat experience. I would definitely, something I would suggest. And I don't want to say it like you said. Most people come in at that last ditch effort of like, I've tried everything else. Well, why did you try everything else before this? Because it's not mainstream. Because it's not, I believe in medicine. I take medicine. I'm not a huge anti-pharmacy person. I believe it serves its purpose when it does.
Yeah.
But I think from the medical side of it, these cliche non-mainstream treatments are being hidden because they could be more beneficial than some of these already mainstream treatments. Um, and it all comes down to the greater good of money. So I'll say
I
it.
won't. I always sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist when I talk about pharmaceutical companies, but I was actually really surprised that the FDA did approve Spravato because it is so effective. But they still will not. We use ketamine off label, so it is not approved by the FDA for treatment of depression and anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain. It's not approved. It is off label. That's why insurance companies don't cover it. That's why people have to pay out of pocket, and it's expensive. Um, and I don't think that it will ever. I don't think we'll ever get there. To be honest, I mean, there's an extreme mental health crisis in this country, but we are never going to address it. I hate saying that. I hate it. And it takes a few people at a time saying, well, we can make a little bit of a difference. I think we can always make a little bit of a difference, but I think the people that are in more power have more power. They have more money, they have more power.
Yeah.
And,
No,
it's just,
we shouldn't just be making a little, we should be throwing everything at it just to see
yeah.
what we could do. And I think as we circle in on this last part of the hour here, I don't want to cut everybody off because I think we could keep going. And I think that's every episode I've said that
No,
now.
I think I
Where
could talk for like 10 hours.
We
I'm
always leave
sorry.
them on a cliffhanger.
yeah, we always leave the cliffhanger. And it's always great to have those conversations, but I hate leaving it at an empty, or at a cliffhanger, but we're going on a little over an hour now. So I'm going to leave it up
Long-winded.
to ending thoughts. Although, Teena, that last thought you just had was absolutely a great one to end on. But I'll give you one more opportunity for any final thoughts, and also Robin.
I need to put the pressure on. Nick, you go first.
Um, part of this podcast is about bringing just different things to each of you to consider, and it goes with the title of Mike's charity is Break the Stigma. the first step in any of this, whether you're you know in crisis, pre-crisis, not anywhere near crisis, but you're afraid for what your future holds, the biggest thing is breaking that stigma and seeking out ways to become more mentally healthy. And what we aim to do on this podcast is help you break down those walls with yourself, help you break down those walls around the firehouse or around the police department or at the nurses station, and start seeking the treatments and therapies that you need to get better. And again, I think this is another incredible tool that's absolutely worth the cost. And I'm glad that Teena had some insight to give us from the clinical side. I'm glad that Mike had the personal experience of being able to go out and do this. And I hope this message reaches people to make them think like, hey, there's hope for me. Or maybe you just don't want to be on 10 pills anymore, and you know what your problem is, and you've done all the steps, but you've hit a wall. I think this is exactly what this podcast is about, is reaching out to people who are, they have found a way to break their stigma and to tackle their mental health, and we're just getting that message out. So I think, again, we've done a great job of bringing on a guest, and I thank Teena for her time and for being a good partner to me in the very beginning of my career.
I like to say I shaped you as a paramedic. It's a lie. Well, I am extremely happy to be on it, and I am happy that you guys are bringing mental health to the forefront of first responders and frontline workers. Um, if ketamine seems like a good choice for you, try it out. I mean, I'm not real sales pitchy. I just like to give information about it and let people know that this is an alternative that's out there. And, you know, people might still say, oh, well, it's it's not FDA approved. It's there's this. I don't want to get addicted. It's there's a ton of information and studies out there. I encourage you to look up all of the university studies that are out there and just, look into it for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. There's plenty of other smarter people out there talking about it.
No, and I think my final thought is, and just off what you and Nick had said, is it's just about being the best version of yourself. And it's amazing what that version can be when you put the work in and you find the right avenues. And it's just trying, like we said, I think before at the beginning or before, it's just sometimes you just got to keep trying things till they stick. But take those opportunities, find the different treatments, find the different ways to address it and become the best version of yourself. On that note, I want to thank you both for coming in today and being on here and sharing your insights. I think this was a very productive episode. I loved the conversation. I have so much more to say, but as always, we have to end because we're on our time. So, anyone that's listening, we do appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully, you got something out of this and that you can move forward with it. Please share it with anyone else that you think would be interested in it, and share it with people you don't think would be interested in. Let's change some minds. Let's change some culture. Let's change some mentalities. As always, if you have any ideas for topics, guests, anything like that, anything you want to hear us talk about, something you agreed with, something you didn't disagree with, please reach out to us on any of our social medias, Break the Stigma Inc., or at our email at breakthestigmainc@gmail.com. You can also check out our website, www.breakthestigmainc.com. And as always, put your cup in the dishwasher, push your chair in, and thank you for joining us at the table today.